It's 6 p.m. on a Thursday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's start with the headlines. Loud sighs of relief could be heard across the nation after hundreds of high school seniors took their college entrance exams, or suneung, today. With lingering uncertainties abroad and what's viewed as insufficient growth momentum at home, Korea's central bank decides to keep its key interest rate steady for a fifth straight month. Seoul Captain Lee Jun-seok is sentenced to life in prison for jumping ship and failing to issue an evacuation order to waiting passengers. His actions led to the deaths of more than 300 people, most of them high school students. It was the moment of truth for over 630,000 students throughout the nation. The college entrance exam, also known as suneung, is something that could have lasting repercussions on the students for the rest of their lives. We connect to our Kwon Jang-Ho, who is at one of the test venues. Jang-Ho, tell us what you've been seeing since the exam ended.
Hi, Daniel. Well, behind me is Seoul High School, and the exams here finished a couple of hours ago, and the test takers have all gone home now. Earlier, there was a wide variety of emotions on display. Some looked relieved and happy, while unfortunately others looked tired and sullen. This exam day is one of the most important moments in a young person's life in Korea. The students spend years preparing for these exams, and then it's all over in one day. There's a huge amount of pressure, as the results can determine which university a student will attend and potentially what job and future they'll have. I spoke to one of the parents earlier to ask how he feels about the system.
The whole of a student's life hangs in the balance of how you feel on one day. I went through it as well, but I don't necessarily think it's a good system. I hope a better system can be introduced in the future, but for now, I guess there's nothing they can do but do well on this day.
Well, Jang-Ho, Koreans learned to deal with the pressure early, but a little extra help could make the day easier. What's being done now from maybe the government or school students and their peers?
Well, on test day, there are a number of things that happen to try to help the students. Most businesses start an hour later than usual to try and help the morning rush hour traffic. More buses and subway trains are in service, and there are even more taxis deployed. The police also give lifts in police cars or on police bikes to any students who might find themselves running late. Junior high school students who are not yet taking the exams also try to do their part by cheering on the seniors as they come onto the school grounds in the morning. They sing songs and give out snacks and energy bars, along with final words of encouragement. I met with one group of juniors who had camped out in front of the school since 9 p.m. last night, so they could reserve the best spot to give their support to their senior schoolmates. Many of them do this as they know they themselves will have to take the exam the next couple of years, and when it's their turn, they will be hoping for some positive energy as they walk in to face one of the most important moments of their lives. Daniel?
Well, thank you for that, Jang-Ho. We wish those test takers all the best. Moving on, Korea's central bank has held its key rate rather steady at 1.5%, taking a much expected wait-and-see approach. According to Hwang Ji-hye, the decision comes ahead of the U.S. Federal Reserve meeting next month, where policymakers are expected to raise the interest rate for the first time since June 2006.
The Bank of Korea decided to stand pat on its record low key interest rate of 1.5% for a fifth straight month in November. While the economy is showing signs of a recent pickup, thanks to improving domestic demand, the top central banker says the growth momentum is not strong enough.
There was an upswing in third quarter consumption, but we also believe the economy is just returning to its normal pace before it was hit by the MERS outbreak.
Uncertainties linger abroad as well. Expectations are growing that the U.S. Federal Reserve will raise its interest rate when it meets again just before Christmas, after the world's biggest economy posted strong job growth last month. Analysts say that given the uncertainty about the Fed's rate hike, a further rate cut at home could cause instability in the local financial market, especially at a time when household debt is rising at a rapid pace.
A possible rate hike from the Fed would prompt a capital outflow from emerging economies. What's important here is how large the outflow is going to be.
But the central bank differentiates Korea from other emerging economies, saying it's confident about the country's fundamentals like its massive current account surplus and foreign reserves. That's why some analysts expect another rate cut in the first half of next year, citing sluggish exports due to slowing demand from China. They add that other than the U.S., most countries like China and Japan are maintaining their easy monetary policies. The BOK governor was cautious, though, about offering any hints at what could lie ahead, saying China will be able to grow in the 6 to 7% range for the time being, and that it's more important for the Korean economy to focus on structural reforms than to rev up the recovery momentum. Hwang Ji-ae, Arirang News.
China's e-commerce giant Alibaba broke its own sales record during this year's Singles' Day online shopping event, and the Korean firms that were in on the action helped the country set a sales record of its own. Park Se-young has the story.
Korea is number 3 after the US and Japan on the list of countries that sell to China on its biggest online shopping day. That's according to ICB, the Korean partner of Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba Group, which says the figures were confirmed by Alibaba's online marketplace, Tmall Global. ICB handles about 90% of the products from Korean firms like Gmarket and We Make Price, which are ordered through Tmall and shipped to China. During the Singles' Day shopping event on Wednesday, Tmall Global received 10 million orders, which is 20 times more than last year. Of that, Korean firms racked up a record 500,000 orders. This year's Singles' Day was massive, and total sales came to $14.3 billion. That's an increase of nearly 60% from last year, making Wednesday the largest shopping day in history. And in just the first 12 hours of the shopping event, Alibaba surpassed last year's sales record of $9 billion. Over 16,000 international brands were involved in transactions between buyers and sellers in 32 countries and regions, nearly 70% of which were orders made on mobile devices. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
There are no plans to carry out a cabinet reshuffle anytime soon. That's according to Korea's senior presidential press secretary, Kim Sung-woo, who told reporters on Thursday that it's time to focus on urgent bills related to the livelihoods of the people. President Park has been calling on lawmakers to swiftly pass bills on labor reform, economic revitalization, as well as the Korea-China Free Trade Agreement. There had been speculation a cabinet reshuffle was imminent to replace ministers who are widely expected to run in next April's general elections. Korea's rival parties will miss Friday's deadline to reach an agreement on redrawing the country's electoral districts ahead of general elections in April. But they did agree on one thing. They're going back into committee for another month of talks. Our Kim Young-gil has more.
The ruling Saenuri Party is against increasing the number of seats in the National Assembly from the current 300. Instead, it wants to increase the number of constituencies and reduce the number of proportional representatives who are chosen based on the total number of votes each party gets. The party believes this will make room for more rural constituencies.
The Saenuri Party is doing all it can to prevent the loss of seats in rural regions by lowering the number of proportional representatives. But the opposition bloc is only thinking about trying to keep the current number of proportional representatives the same.
There are currently 54 lawmakers elected through the proportional representation system, and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy Party wants to maintain that number. It believes that doing otherwise would stoke regionalism in Korean politics.
Our basic policy is to maintain the current number of proportional representatives and prevent the expansion of assembly seats. We'll also do our best to prevent the loss of seats for rural areas.
Last year, the Constitutional Court ruled that electoral boundaries should be readjusted to address the problem of unequal representation, which has arisen because of changes to the population. Under the plan currently up for consideration, the number of urban electoral districts would increase while the number of rural constituencies would decrease in accordance with the shrinking of rural populations. The two parties hope to reach agreement on a rezoning scheme before the current parliamentary session ends in December. Amid the deadlock, lawmakers did pass some 40 pending livelihood bills on Thursday. They also agreed to extend the life of the Special Parliamentary Political Reform Committee by a month to continue their discussions on readjusting the electoral map. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
A key aide to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who was thought to have been purged, may in fact have been sent to a top re-education facility. Kim Ji-yeon reports on the whereabouts of Choi Ryong-hae, the secretary of the ruling Workers' Party and one of the most powerful men in the North.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has reportedly sent one of his close aides to the country's top school for re-education. Government sources in South Korea told Seoul-based Yonhap News, Choi Ryong-hae, the secretary of the ruling Workers' Party, is said to be receiving training at the Kim Il-sung Higher Party School named after the country's founder. Questions about Choi's whereabouts arose after he was excluded from the roster of a preparatory committee led by Kim Jong-un set up after the death of Lee Il-sung, the marshal of North Korea's military. Some experts believe he was being punished for his poor handling of youth-related affairs, while others think it may have been related to problems with the construction of a dam near Mount Paektu. Also, North Korea has reportedly replaced a military commander who ordered deadly landmine blasts near the border in August. Kim Sang-yong, the former commander of the North's 2nd Corps, has been sent to the 9th Corps, far from the inter-Korean border. Local media outlets in Seoul generally seem to view the punishment as lenient. As for Choi, he could be back at his post in the coming months or years after his re-education. It is believed that Kim, the former commander, will keep his position in the military. Kim was listed as a member of the preparatory committee for the military marshal's funeral. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
North Korea is boosting its weapons capabilities, which means a new approach to diplomacy is needed. That's according to North Korea expert Joel Witt, who is in Seoul for a seminar today focusing on Pyongyang's nuclear future. Song Ji-san shares with us some of his insights and predictions.
It's been over 30 years since North Korea began developing its weapons delivery systems, but they have now reached a point where they're more focused on boosting their weapons capabilities.
There are a lot of different things they'll be doing in terms of improving the quality of their weapons. And it's not increasing the size of the stockpile goes without saying, but they'll probably work on more miniaturization of warheads. They'll work on reducing the amount of nuclear material in each of the warheads.
The co-founder of North Korea monitoring website 38 North said at a seminar in Seoul on Thursday, Pyongyang's nuclear arsenal could be as large as 100 by 2020 if the regime is able to carry out a nuclear test each year. Also at the seminar, weapons engineer John Schilling made note of the regime's increased emphasis on submarines since Kim Jong-un came to power in 2011, pointing to the regime's first ocean-going submarine in 20 years.
25 years ago, under the regime of Kim Il-sung, North Korea had a very substantial program for building large ocean-going submarines. Under Kim Jong-un, much more renewed emphasis on the larger submarines and on missile capability.
This, of course, with the aim of conducting more missile tests. Meanwhile, we'd also speculated on how the North's possession of nukes could shape the Korean peninsula in the future.
Having nuclear weapons will change the reunification picture because a nuclear North Korea is going to think, well, gee, reunification's only going to happen on our terms, and we have the nuclear weapons to back it up.
With the international community's attempts at engaging the regime in dialogue, the six-party denuclearization talks, for example, in a virtual coma for years, we proposed a new approach to diplomacy that involves not just sanctions, but something that could pique the North's interest enough to keep it from building more nuclear weapons. Song Ji-san, Arirang News.
In other news, it's been more than a year since the Seoul ferry sank, taking the lives of more than 300 passengers, most of them high school students. Today, Korea's Supreme Court upheld the murder conviction and life sentence for the captain of the ferry, who fled the vessel without issuing an evacuation order to his passengers. Kim Min-ji gives us the latest.
Life imprisonment for murder. Seoul's top court has upheld the lower court ruling for Lee Jun-suk, the captain of the ill-fated Seoul ferry that sank last year, taking the lives of more than 300 people, most of them high school students. The Supreme Court ruled that Lee had committed willful negligence, saying that he fled the ship without giving an evacuation order. The Chief Justice said the captain could have warned the passengers of the situation, which could have reduced the number of deaths, but he failed to carry out his duties as the ship's captain, saying that this was similar to drowning the passengers in water. Survivors of the fatal accident said Lee ordered passengers to stay put, even as he was one of the first to be rescued. The Supreme Court also upheld jail sentences for 14 members of Lee's crew, ranging from 18 months to 12 years. On April 16, 2014, a total of 304 people died when the ferry capsized off Korea's southwestern coast in one of the country's deadliest maritime disasters on record. Divers recovered 295 bodies from the ship's wreckage and surrounding waters, but 9 victims are still missing. Shanghai Salvage, a Chinese state-run consortium, has been hired to handle the job of salvaging the Seoul ferry. The company is aiming to lift it onto a floating deck by early next year and have the vessel on shore by mid-2016. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
That's all from us for now. Tune in at 10 p.m. Korea time for more. Thank you for watching.